have some truly beautiful fall weather today. It's going to be nice. But I know it's getting a little colder these days. So taking good care and heat's on and all that good stuff. What I have to say, I'm still recovering, of course, from all the big baptism yesterday. That was a wonderful service I think we had, and still thrilled about the piece the choir did for that anthem. It's marvelous. Bit of a surprise too, yeah, and we found out about 15 minutes before, but Caleb certainly appreciated it too. Did you, Caleb? He white. I don't know. Okay. Things going on this week. There is the tomorrow noon Women's Association meeting. Please bring a sandwich for lunch. Anything else we should say about that? Peacemaker quilting Thursday. We're back in action. Next Sunday is 2 cents a meal. Newsletter deadline. I don't know. Any other announcements?
Thank you to Jerry and especially Mary Lou for that wonderful breakfast yesterday morning. And Henrietta. If anybody missed it, they missed a wonderful breakfast.
Nothing further. The peace of Christ be with you.
What's all the other things we'll get? Hearing about problem.
Tom and Nancy have an anniversary tomorrow week. Yeah, okay. Okay. So, that's done right finally. Let's read together the call to worship. I'll begin. God, you are holy, enthroned in the praises of Israel. To you they cried, and they were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame.
God, you are holy. All praise to you now and forever.
God is not far from us. When trouble is near, God is our help and our refuge. Let's confess our sins to God that we might receive mercy. Turn the page and we'll say together, we know the commandments. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not defraud. Honor your father and your mother. We are sure to follow them. But instead, we cannot let go of the things we think we need, think we think is important. We cannot follow you or love you, O God, with all our hearts, our minds, and our strength. We refrain from giving our whole selves to you. Forgive our disobedience, our lack of commitment, our desire to focus on material things instead of on your will for us. In the name of our teacher, Jesus Christ, who gave his whole life for the sake of the gospel. Amen. Hear this declaration of forgiveness from the book of Hebrews. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Therefore you can approach the throne of grace with boldness, and you will receive mercy and find grace in your time of need. In Jesus Christ we find the forgiveness we seek. we're going to do kind of as a group here. Oh, no, you two are back. Okay, sorry, I didn't see you. All right, come on down. All right, I have a little story for you all that Elise and I practiced in Sunday school class. Do you think we could do that? Okay, we don't have to, but believe it or not, in Sunday school we talked about wrestling. And I was in a martial art called judo back in high school, and Brianna and Marissa's uncles were all big wrestlers, and there was actually, believe it or not, a wrestling match in the Bible between a fellow named Jacob and an angel. Jacob was kind of the head of Israel at the time, and he had a lot of questions for God, and anyway, they had this match with lockdown, drag out, where Jacob was trying to get some answers from the angel. Okay, so believe it or not, I once saw a wrestling match that I don't think the guy was an angel, but let's just say it was a real mismatch. And so Lisa and I are going to act this out. Okay? You're still good with this? All right. So the open heavyweight division of the U.S. Nationals, not that I was in it, I'm definitely not a sumo wrestler, but there was a guy who was sumo wrestler size. Interestingly enough, he was only a yellow belt, which is the thing we give kids is kind of like the try-hard award in martial arts. It's like, well, you're stuck with class for a month, we'll move you up from white belt to yellow belt. And this guy was no technique, no grace, anything like that. All he did was he weighed about 500 pounds, and the second place guy was only 250. So that's about the difference between Elise and I. And anyway, for the final match, this is how it went. And so the big guy, yellow belt, is against big tough black belt, but he's not sumo wrestler sized. So sumo wrestler comes up, just sort of walks up to him, puts him in a bear hug, and then falls down. And that's all he has to do. He just squashes him. But to give the black belt credit, he didn't stop. He kept going. He wiggled out of the pin, which I don't think the sumo wrestler was used to. He was probably used to people just sort of saying, okay, you win, I give, uncle, boom, match over. And not only that, but the 250-pound black belt, he eventually won the match, and this is how he did it. Okay, we're gonna act this out like we did this last week. Okay. So usually when people were against the big yellow belt, they would, when he would come toward them, they'd kind of back up into a corner, wait for the inevitable. But the black belt was smart, and he did something different. What did he do? He came at the big guy, which surprised him, and he threw his hands up. And then what did he do with the hand? Woo! He kind of flipped him and cut him down, and he was, the whole stadium went nuts when they heard this. Because it was like, wow, we didn't think that was possible. And sometimes I think, like that wrestling match, faith can be a challenge. You pray for things, they don't always happen the way you want or at all. But you keep praying, you keep striving, and sometimes I think God respects that kind of grit, or better things will result. I saw it, as I say, the extreme case in a wrestling match, but I've seen that all kinds of sort of everyday miracles of people just sticking to prayer and trying God, even when it didn't make a lot of sense. And sometimes miracles do happen. Sometimes the underdog does win. All right, thank you, Elise, for demonstrating that. And you all know lots more about wrestling now, so that's progress, right? Okay, you guys can go to community time, maybe? Yeah, okay. Oh, the Genesis passage. Now we're going to hear the biblical account of a wrestling match between a man and an angel. Also pay attention to the spiritual elements. I think the wrestling match wasn't maybe just a physical contest, but a wrestling of faith with Jacob and God and the things that had happened to Jacob, or he thought might happen to him. Okay, so see for yourself what you think. Genesis chapter 32, verses 3 to 32. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus shall you say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now, and I have oxen and donkeys, flocks, men servants, maid servants. And I have sent to tell my lord in order that I might find favor in thy sight." Okay, so I'll give you a little intro there too. Jacob and Esau were about as big a rivalry, almost as Cain and Abel, except Esau was more like the Cain figure and Jacob like Abel, but Abel escaped. And they haven't seen each other for 20 years, and Jacob's trying to find out if Esau is still mad at him. Okay, so let's see if that's the case. So the messengers returned to Jacob from Esau, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and 400 men with him." Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people that were with him into 2 flocks and herds, the camels into 2 companies, thinking, if Esau comes to one company and destroys it, then the other company will be left to escape. So once again, 400 men is not a welcome home party in this case. These are armed men back in those days, and let's just say Jacob's a little bit afraid of what might happen. So Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, didst thou say to me, return to your country and to your kindred, and I will do you good." I'm saying, God, you told me to do this. "I am not worthy of the least of all the steadfast love and all the faithfulness which thou hast shown to thy servant. For my own staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and slay us all, the mothers with the children. But thou wilt say, I will do you good, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for the multitude." So he lodged there that night, and took from what he had with him a present for his brother Esau, 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels, and colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 she-donkeys, and 10 he-donkeys. These he delivered into the hands of his servant every drove by himself, and said to his servants, "Pass on before me, and put a space between the drove and the drove." He started foremost, "When Esau my brother greets you and asks you, to whom do you belong, where are you going, and whose of these belong to you, then you shall say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau, and moreover he is behind us." In other words, he's trying to butter him up with the presents now that he's knows he may be in big trouble. He likewise instructed the second and third and all that followed in the droves, "You shall say the same thing to Esau, and you meet him. You shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he thought, I will appease him with the presence that goes before me, and afterwards I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me." So the present passed on before him, and he himself lodged that night in the camp. So now he's alone, and here comes this wrestling match I've been telling you all about for most of the service. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives and his 2 maids, his 11 children, and crossed the fork of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man, and the text supplies actually an angel, wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and Jacob's thigh was put out of joint, and he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel, For you have striven with God and the people and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, tell me your name. So he said, why is it that you ask me my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed, Peniel limping because of his thigh. Therefore to this day the Israelites do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh on the sinew of the hip. Okay, now jump over to the epistle reading, which has no wrestling in it, but also has some good advice for us. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 14 through 4, verse 5. But as you continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you learned it, and how from childhood you have been acquainted with the sacred writings which are able to instruct you for salvation through faith in Jesus Christ, all Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, that a person of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. I charge you in the presence of God and Christ Jesus, who is the judge of the living and the dead, by his appearing in his kingdom, preach the word, be urgent in season and out of season, convince, rebuke, exhort, be unfailing in patience and in teaching. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own likings, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander into myths. As for you, always be steady, endure suffering, do the work of evangelists, fulfill your ministry. Okay, and then last is the gospel reading, where Jesus describes prayer as like coming before an unjust judge. Not that God is unjust, but he talks about persistence in the prayer, which we do not all somehow connect to the children's sermon. So, Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8, he told them a parable to the effect that they ought to always pray and not lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor regarded people. And there was a widow in that city who kept coming to him and saying, vindicate me against my adversary. For a while he refused, but afterward he said to himself, though I neither fear God nor regard people, yet because this widow bothers me, I will vindicate her, or she will wear me out by her continual coming. And the Lord said, hear what the unrighteous judge says. Will not God vindicate his elect who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will vindicate them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? These are our scripture lessons for today. Thanks be to God. Please join me in a prayer of illumination on the scriptures today and my message Bible. Oh Lord, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts will be worthy in your sight, O Lord, my rock, my redeemer. Amen. So on Thursday, I had the church board meeting, we call it session, and I had a little time before then. It started at 7 o'clock, and so there was a bunch of our kids, junior high, middle school, senior high, who were playing various sporting events. The two Bezos girls, Marissa and Brianna, were playing volleyball that day, and so I got to see a little bit of their matches and competition, and a lot of respect particularly to Hannah Stuber, who's a very good soccer player. She's even gotten the Lakeshore News for scoring goals and things. She was playing, if you remember, Thursday was like, it was cold and rainy, the apple pickers weren't out. They got the day off, which I perfectly understood that they made the girls' soccer team play, but she was good. And I was in the stands with some of the family, and one of which is Scott Lockwood, who he and his brother were all high school wrestlers. And so I got to talk to him about the Old Testament passage. Specifically, I asked him, is there a move that he knew of that could dislocate a hip, which is what happens to Jacob at the end of his a wrestling match. And Scott couldn't really think of one. He said, you know, it's possible if somebody dived in and a leg was out at the wrong angle. It's in theory could happen. He'd never seen anything like it, and you know, he'd had lots of injuries himself. And I asked Genevieve about it too, since you know she's a doctor, and she said, "Well, I think in car accidents I've heard of dislocated hips. You know, it's easy to fall and break a hip, but to completely pull it out takes a lot of force." The only thing I could have thought of was that judo national tournament where I described a sumo wrestler showing up. But the point is that sometimes there are wrestling matches we have with God, and perhaps we can't exactly win it, or we think we can't win it, because the opponent or the thing we're wrestling with, maybe not God, maybe somebody's health, say they're in the hospital, or a family situation that never seems to resolve, relationships, you know, fill in the blank. There are things that seems like you're wrestling against a giant. And in Jacob's case, the giant was the situation with his brother Esau. They don't actually, the two of them, as I say, wrestle themselves, but they've sort of been wrestling their whole lives. They were twins. Esau came out first, and Jacob actually comes out clutching his heel, the account says, and they were always kind of at each other. Esau was the big athletic one, but maybe not the smartest or sharpest tool in the shed. But Jacob used that, even though he was smaller, to his advantage. He was very good at tricking Esau and getting what he wanted. One time Esau had come back from hunting. He was a good hunter, and he was practically starving. And Jacob said, "Well, I'll give you this bowl of soup if you give me the family inheritance." Didn't seem like a good deal, but Esau fell for it. Anyway, it was, you know, that was just kind of the relationship. But the real trick, or the biggest trick that made them almost Cain and Abel, except they, as you find out later, sort of make up in the end. Esau does not kill Jacob. They are reconciled eventually. But the real straw that broke the camel's back was that Esau, as the first twin out of whom, was supposed to inherit the spiritual blessing of being the patriarch of Israel. Originally it started with Abraham having this vision that God said, your descendants will be my chosen people, and you'll go to this promised land, and I will bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And that passed from Abraham to his only son by his wife Sarah, named Isaac, and Isaac was the father of these two boys. And so Jacob finds a way to even get that spiritual blessing, not just a whole bunch of stuff, but the sort of holiness of God even, which sounds strange, but the Old Testament has lots of twists and turns to it. So what happened was Isaac was on his deathbed. His eyesight was very poor at the end of his life. And Jacob actually dresses up as Esau and talks like Esau and cooks him another bowl of soup. I'm not sure what was in the soup, but it was very good. And so Jacob is blessed mistakenly by Isaac. And at that's the last dog. Esau's after him. He has to run out of town. And eventually he lands in another country even where his uncle Laban lives. He's there for 20 years. Okay, not going to go through that whole cycle of what happens in the 20 years, but the thing for me, which is why I bring all this up, is that when he was there that night, God tells him to go back to Esau, be reconciled. Sort of like the family of God needs to get back together. Jacob's like, okay, well, it's 20 years, maybe he's forgiven me, but it doesn't look like it. Jacob's sending herds ahead, presents, the best money to buy at that time, but Esau's coming with 400 armed men, which looks like he might not just kill Jacob, but even Jacob's family. And so the wrestling match, I think, with God is really a faith crisis more than a contest of physical strength. That Jacob's saying, "Oh God, you told me to do this. Yes, I made mistakes along the way. I kind of did some things I shouldn't have, perhaps, but I'm still your man, right? I'm still this thing that you promised my grandfather Abraham and Isaac, and by the way, that guy Esau is really a loser, so you tricked him so easily. But I don't know if he said that. It doesn't say that in the Bible. But I'm sure he's thinking that as he's wrestling and saying, God, how can this be your will? How can this be right? Now, hold that thought for a moment. I learned in sermons you should never make yourself, the hero, because it makes you look good. But I'll bend that rule a little bit today to tell you about one time that I actually had a match against an Olympic athlete in judo. Now, I have to qualify this statement by saying this was a guy who was basically going around to the different clubs in the country, as Olympic athletes do, and sort of, promoting the sport and making the kids feel good. I was maybe 16 or 17. And this guy, while he wasn't much taller than me, was just all muscle. I don't know if he even weighed that much. He wasn't like the sumo wrestler by any means, but he was just an excellent, ultimate, professional athlete level of build and physique for what he was. And it wasn't a competition. He just was going there to be with the kids and give them a go against an Olympic athlete. But it was pretty clear that when I was there, the point wasn't to win, because I never could, because that would have been hopeless. But it was to endure. It was to learn from him about, even if he wasn't using his full strength and speed, to see how well he could do the moves, how fast, how clean, and to teach us to be more like that. And in the end, of course, he threw me in. My guess is, and again, this is me speculating a bit about what happened to Jacob, that if he had that sort of match against the angel, he might have thought of it as a dream. But the angel at the very end, he kind of hurts his hip. It sounds more than a little hurt to be dislocated. He actually has a limp the rest of his life. But he could never say it was just a dream, it was just a product of my imagination. I really did wrestle with God. And the angel blesses him too, even gives him a new name, almost a kind of a born-again experience of saying, you are no longer the Jacob, the trickster, the con man, the guy who fights with his brother all the time. You are now Israel. You have strived against even God, against people as well, and you have prevailed. I don't think it was in the sense of, who sort of pinned who, but in the sense of you have endured, you will come out better on the end of it. That's what my understanding of the gospel reading is too, when Jesus says praying can be like going before an unjust judge. I have a brother-in-law who used to be a public defender, used to tell me a joke about, what the difference is between a judge and a 400-pound gorilla? In the courtroom, absolutely nothing. They can both do whatever they want. Lawyers just try and, be very polite, and you do so well if you're there. But the idea that there's this poor widow who just keeps going back to kind of a corrupt or at least an uncaring judge, and again, to the point where he's like, I don't really care about anybody, I can do what I want, but she's just wearing me down. She just keeps coming to me with this plea, and I will grant this. Not that Jesus is saying God is unjust, though sometimes it may seem that way, but in the same way we should pray. Now, I have to give some credit where credit is due for this sermon, because in August I wanted to meet Father Matthew Walter next door, because first of all, his name is Walter, so Pastor Walter wanted Father Walter, but also to see the new guy in town. And one of the things he said in his sermon was about, we want church growth and development and all that. And he didn't have so much the big 5-step plan, at least not at that sermon, but he just said, really the big thing is prayer. That whether the Catholic Church's wonderful traditions of the Rosary or the Our Father, or many ways that the Protestants about doing that in a regulated fashion, says that's what changes us. That's what what makes us different and makes a difference in our lives. I know my prayers aren't anyway magical. I go to hospitals and pray for people. They don't instantly jump off the bed, but I believe prayer does somehow change God's hearts. It allows us to become more graceful, more holy, more whole in the process. So whatever you're wrestling with, and I know I'm wrestling with stuff, I know prayer makes a difference. Let us go to God in prayer and know that changes the world. Thanks be to God, and the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, so speaking of prayer, we're about to do it. Something Tom asked me before he had to leave was to keep Nancy in prayer. She is at Strong Hospital now and is in the intensive care unit there. So anyway, he and she are definitely wrestling with things.
Walter, I really enjoyed the hymns this morning, but I have been very blessed to be able to drive back and forth to this church, which I will always try to be a member of. However, we need to say prayers for those, especially the children, who are refugees far away. They are not Christian. I don't care that they're not Christian. I care that they are innocent children and innocent people. And please say your prayers for them.
Thank you, Beth. I think there's over 20 million refugees in the world today. And as you say, most of them are children who have nothing to do with whatever conflicts they are fleeing from. So thank you for lifting that up. Okay. See any other hands? So let's go to God in prayer. Dear God, some days I wish I knew words that would exact certain actions, that I could just say them, people would be healed, children would be taken care of, like the refugee children, or Nancy would get off her sick bed that she's in now and been for the hospital for over 2 weeks. I don't have that power. You do, but miracles of leaves that change once again, showing us the glory of the world around us. And you have a long view of history that is far beyond mine or any of ours, and it does bend towards justice. It does tell us that in the end, love wins, and the ultimate gift of that is your Son, Jesus Christ, who loves us both now and forevermore, and wills that we might have life and have it more fully. God, I know there's lots on our hearts today, some so heavy we can't even speak it, some so wonderful that might bring us to tears in a good way. God, hear our prayers now, both spoken and unspoken, as we pray the prayer you taught your disciples, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Amen. As we have been blessed, and there are infinite blessings, if you even try and count them, let us also be a blessing to others, particularly through the ministry of this church, whether the time, talents, and treasures we may have. Thank you. go forth this day, children of wonder, rejoicing in the good, praying through the bad,